This video might have to be a two-part because there's so much information in here. However, I've got some wild connections to be made here. Now, this video is for entertainment purposes only. It just so happens that this entertainment's got receipts. So I'm going to talk about a club called the Club of Rome. Apparently, it's a very exclusive club that only accepts 100 members of the brightest minds in the world. Now, Pierre Elliott Trudeau was one of those members, so I highly doubt that this has anything to do with IQ and has a lot to do with how much money you have in your bank, but let's just pretend to believe them. Now, their entire belief system runs on eugenics and neo-Malthusianism, and neo-Malthusianism means population control. So in the 1968, this club was formed, by the way, in a Rockefeller-like committee kind of thing. And it's also very interconnected to other groups such as the Bilderbergs, the Committee of 300, which called us a bunch of useless eaters, and a bunch of secret societies that also want to depopulate us. Now, one of the major goals of the Club of Rome is to reduce the world's population by 2 billion people through war, famine, abortion, and disease. Yeah, I mean, wonderful club. It's also the parent club to the World Economic Forum. Surprise, surprise. So this group decides to team up with the CIA in a project called MK Naomi, where they made the AIDS virus and they decided to depopulate a portion of the population that they deemed unfit. Yeah, let me show you. So, yeah. Pause to read. Basically, they decided to exterminate undesirable elements of society. And how did they do this? Through AIDS. And Project MK Naomi, which, by the way, is a biowarfare and chemical warfare project that the CIA did with Club of Rome. And how did they infect people with HIV in 1978? With the hepatitis B vaccine. Yeah, isn't that awesome? And if you think that that's far-fetched, basically pause to read this because it literally states that the microbe would be introduced by vaccine to the masses. The prophylactic would be used by the elite. The cure will be administered to survivors when it was decided that enough people had died. No red flags there at all. But don't worry, I know what you're going to say. Well, things have changed. That was back in the 70s. Well, let me show you a manuscript called the Global 2000 that they wrote and gave out to governments about population control. That happened in the 80s. Pause to read this. Basically, it is telling the government that the world population growth has dramatic consequences if something is not drastically done. Now it gets weirder because in my next video, I will show Fauci talking about actually making the pandemic that happened in 2020. Okay, so this is part 2 to the MK Naomi and Club of Rome video. Please go back and watch that one because there's so much information that I can't recap everything. Now, like with every other video, this is for entertainment purposes only. But these entertainments come with some receipts. But you guys do what you will with them and make your own conclusions. I don't want to push any ideas in anyone's head. But this is what I found. So I will show you a clip here. So remember in my last video where I said the Club of Rome got together with the CIA to make something called Project MK Naomi, which basically studies bioweapons and chemical weapons on people? Well, basically, the Special Operation Division scientists at Fort Detrick, Maryland, worked with the NIH, which was run at the time by Dr. Robert Gallo and Dr. Anthony Fauci, to basically make a policy called the National Security Study Memorandum, and I found the document, and it is declassified. Let me show you. Here it is. Now, you guys can Google that at the top there. That's why I left that on there. Or you can Google NSSM 200, but make sure that you use VPN and don't use Google. So I'm going to go through some of the things that it says in this memorandum. Basically, they're stating that if we have an exponential growth of population, which, by the way, started after World War II during the baby boomers, that we would have a lot of issues, not just food security, but also that we would have security issues with governments and other agencies, and that this would cause basically a giant collapse of the entire system that they have created so far. So here's some other apparent population factors that will have negative effects on the society that we live in today. Now, in my last paperwork or last video, I showed paperwork that they were basically trying to depopulate us through, jibby jabbies. And here is a clip of basically Fauci saying something super shady, and I want you guys to tell me what you think.
There might be a need or even an urgent call for an entity of excitement out there that's completely disruptive, that's not beholden to bureaucratic strings and processes.
So we really do have a problem of how the world perceives influenza, and it's going to be very difficult to change that unless you do it from within and say, I don't care what your perception is, we're going to address the problem in a disruptive way and in an iterative way, because you do need both.
But it is not too crazy to think that an outbreak of a novel avian virus could occur in China somewhere. We could get the RNA sequence from that, beam it